once or twice a year, I like to really commit myself to training. It's something I've been passionate about, something I've done many times. I'm not a pro athlete. I've worked in sport for over a decade, but I love doing this, and I'm fortunate enough that I have a lot of close friends who are also in the space who have a level of expertise that are second to none. So what I'm trying to do really is put a program together for myself for this month and try to take into consideration multiple factors, not just the training component, because that's obviously my strength. But, in this, I'm trying to maintain as much muscle or healthy weight as possible while trying to lose some of the unnecessary body weight or fat that's kind of just lingering. I want to make sure, again, I have a family, I have a job, I'm limited in time. I don't want to lose any ability to think clearly, perform at work, even performance in some athletic endeavors, and be there for my family and my kids, my wife, as much as I can be. So in essence, I'm trying to put a program together that's going to maximize my lean body mass, help me lose some of that unnecessary weight in a way that's not going to impact my day-to-day, my ability to be strong at work, be a good father and husband, and tell a story throughout the process, because when there's a plan, things become much easier. But there's so many different ways to consider how to maximize this. And so just hopefully throughout this process we can tell a bit of a story, and we can all learn. You've heard it before, but for me, consistency is key. And so we're not going to do anything too extreme, but we're going to make sure that we're consistent and follow a plan, because the saying is fail to plan, plan to fail. So following a plan and not killing ourselves with that plan or making it too restrictive where it's not feasible, but something that falls within the confines of the responsibilities of the day-to-day. And so again, what this won't be is like a super cut where I'm going to get shredded in 4 weeks. Those are miserable. You don't want to be around me or anybody who does them when they're doing it, because we're short-tempered and just sluggish. So that's not what that's going to be. And it's not going to be super, super strict. It's going to be calculated. There's going to be windows where hopefully I have ice cream with my kids and my wife, or might have a glass of red wine here and there, but in general, I'm going to try to be very consistent. What's unique about this is I haven't made a substantial change to the training program. My loading over the last 2 months is relatively consistent, and I'll walk through that, but the training isn't really changing much. The big piece is the timing and the consistency of the nutrition and the basic supplementation, making sure the protein intake is at a proper level, and doing everything I can to maximize the sleep routine. Those are the two major changes. The loading plan that I typically do, that's not really changing, and I can walk through that, but there are key variables that will vary on a day-to-day depending on what I'm doing and what demands exist. And then there's other ones that are non-negotiable that I'm going to try to sustain on a regular basis every day to create a consistent habit. So the loading plan or the training program, that's something that's going to change on a day-to-day basis. The timing of training, which is very important. When I'm training, will have direct correlation to how I'm eating before it or after it, and I'm going to, when possible, train during the best time of day, so that I can kind of fall into the strategy of my nutrition. So when I'm eating, the daily nutrition plan, and then of course the timing of nutrition and the timing of training and the strategy of nutrition for that day, they're all tied together. So depending on what else is going on, those are going to be the key variables that kind of shift around. Timing of sleep, as much as I can, I'm going to try to be consistent with that. Pre-plan some of the cheat meals or the timing of those things, just to make sure that I'm not too strict and restricting some fun things, but also being relatively disciplined. And then there's non-negotiable, which aren't variables, but they're more kind of key things that I'm going to do on a regular basis, which is maintaining an exact, a relatively exact protein intake, basic supplementation, and nothing crazy. and then making sure that I'm getting morning sunlight exposure, as well as wearing my blue light blocker glasses in the evening. So that's, you know, I could say, okay, let's just not go on our phone, or let's not watch TV, or let's not be on our screen for 2 hours before bed. But most people would laugh at that, including myself. So I've got these pair of glasses that are meant to keep the blue light from coming in, which is, the light that really does impact that ability to kind of come down prior to sleep. So those are the variables that'll change on a day-to-day basis, as well as ones that I'm going to try to keep as consistent as possible. From a global perspective, there's kind of a couple key things that I'm really focusing on, and this just works for me, or hopefully it will work for me. We'll see. And what works for one works for one. So by no means is this prescriptive, but for me, I tend to do well on a bit of a shorter feeding cycle. So it's a modified intermittent fasting, and I don't do it every day. But when I can, I try to kind of keep my feeding window between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. And that shifts for different people. I do 10 a.m. because I get up quite early, and by 6 p.m. I'm ready to eat, and I go to bed early. So that's something that I'm going to do as consistently as possible. And what I'm going to do from a carbohydrate perspective is I'm going to train high and relax or chill low. So most of my carbohydrate intake is going to come 2 to 3 hours prior to training, as well as a bit of a refeed following training. But other than that, I'm going to go relatively low carb. It doesn't mean I'm just having salad and protein. It just means I'm very conscious of when I'm having my fruit or my oatmeal, or any of my carbohydrates. So knowing that will definitely impact my timing of training, and the type of training that I'm doing on a regular basis. Every morning, even though I'm in the Pacific Northwest and the sun can hide this time of year, I'm trying to get some morning sunlight exposure. That's rule number one. Rule number two, for myself, it's 2 grams of protein per kilogram of weight. So I'm about 185, 190 pounds right now. Times that by 2, that's the protein intake that I'm trying to get in during that regular feeding window. So it's hard to get that much, and it'll be a balance between 3 regular meals and some collagen and whey protein in between to make sure I get there. On a regular basis, on a daily basis, I'll take vitamin D, omega-3s. I'll personally take 5 grams of creatine, and I'll have amino acids that I take throughout the day. And like I mentioned, I will make sure I have my blue light blockers on in the evening at least 2 hours before bed, which is just like wearing glasses at the house. From a loading perspective, for my training program, on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, those are my high loading days. So on Monday, I do a pretty heavy lower body kind of core session. On Tuesday, I do an upper body and perhaps some treadmill or some HIIT work, which I would consider more of like a medium load session. Wednesday, it's medium high load, but it's a pretty intense hockey game, 75 to 90 minutes, and that's in the evening. On Thursday is really my recovery day. I'll walk the dog. We'll go to the park with the kids, whatever it is, but there's nothing specific from a loading perspective, especially, I go to bed late on Wednesday and you need a day to recover. On Fridays, it'll be very similar to Monday, if not exactly the same thing, a high load, lower body core, not the same exercise, but the same intent. On Saturday and Sunday, kids are out of school. When I train will be dependent on when I can find windows to train. So I might train first thing in the morning on a fasted block, or do it in the afternoon, similar to what I do on Monday and Friday. And then Sunday, I like to do a longer run with the dog. It's zone 2 or steady state work, nothing crazy. Go for about 60 minutes, let the dog kind of run free and prepare for the week. So that's my typical loading schedule. So if you think about that, Monday, Wednesday, Friday are higher loads. Tuesday and Saturday are medium loads. Sunday I would consider a low load, even though it's 60 minutes, just because of the pace I'm going. And Thursday is an off day or a recovery day. So Thursday, Sunday are low to none. Tuesday and Saturday are medium. And Monday, Wednesday, Friday are medium high. That's kind of the way we've looked at this. So if you bucket those, and I know this is a lot, but if you bucket those, Mondays and Fridays, I'm going to try to always train in the afternoon around 12 o'clock if possible. And the reason why I'm doing that is I want to maintain my intermittent fasting and my feeding window, which is 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. And what I'll purposely do is have a higher carbohydrate and protein meal about 2 hours before, so at 10 a.m. I get up again around 5:30, so that can be a long time to not eat. And in the morning, I typically have a couple cups of coffee, and I'll have some amino acids in the morning, 1 or 2 scoops, just to keep everything kind of rolling. And so that'll be the same on Friday, where I'll have a higher carbohydrate meal with protein at 10 a.m. and I'll have my coffee and amino acids and hydrate in the morning. On Tuesday, I try to keep it a little bit more fluid. So, if I do train in the morning, it's not the end of the world. I'll have some amino acids, and then after I'll have a kind of a typical meal like I do on Monday and Friday. But I'm not, too stuck on when I train on that day. If I can do in the afternoon, great. But I do like to do a bit of fasted cardio, so doing that in the morning's beneficial as well. On on Wednesday, that's an interesting one, because if I train Tuesday morning and I follow my 10 to 6 feeding window and I don't have hockey till 9 p.m. on Wednesday night, which whether it's hockey or basketball, whatever it is, I actually am going to strategically go quite low in carbohydrates throughout the day. I'll push my feeding window instead of 10 to 6, more like 11 or 11:30, and push that out. And my major carbohydrate day or meal will be a dinner. Again, probably 3 hours or 2.5 hours before I play hockey. During the sport, I'll have some amino acids and I'll finish with a protein shake. And again, I don't typically eat late, but it's more important to recover after training sessions than follow intermittent fasting in my eyes. Thursday is a relatively low carb day as a whole. It doesn't mean that I'm having 30 grams. I'm just not looking to fuel at that level. So it's following that 10 to 6 feeding window and trying to keep it with a protein source and vegetables and whatever I kind of want to eat there, whether it's a salad or steamed broccoli or baked salmon, doesn't matter. I'm just trying to go low because I'm not training very hard. Friday, I've kind of mentioned, it's like Monday again, a higher carbohydrate meal around 10 a.m. so that I can train at 12. And then Saturday is like my Tuesday. I'll train when I can, and then Sunday it's kind of fluid. I'm gonna go relatively low. If I go a bit harder than I intended to on the run, I might have a medium level of carbohydrate. And I'm not giving exact prescriptions because that's not the purpose. The purpose is to understand the rhythm of it, right? So training high, always trying to have carbohydrates 2 to 3 hours prior to the session, and then maybe a piece of fruit and some collagen or something during the session to keep that rolling. But then outside of those training windows, whether before or after, going relatively low with a high protein intake. That's the sum of my approach.